Finn Walker thought Christmas Eve would be just another lonely overtime shift. He pushed his mop across cold marble floors in the empty corridors of Sterling Enterprises, while his 7-year-old daughter Astrid slept alone in their cramped rental apartment beside a second-hand Christmas tree. His co-workers had long since vanished into the night, laughing about ski trips and diamond bracelets. Finn only hoped to finish in time to call Astrid before she drifted off. But near midnight, the elevator chimed in the silent lobby, freezing him in place. The doors parted not for a security guard, but for Alexandra Sterling herself. The powerful CEO wrapped in a red cashmere sweater, clutching a gift-wrapped box, a personnel file bearing his name, and a secret she had kept about him for years. One that would change this Christmas forever. Snow fell in soft drifts over the city that night, coating sidewalks and rooftops in powdery white. Christmas lights draped every lamppost and storefront, their glow reflected in shop windows displaying toys and winter coats. Somewhere in the distance, carolers sang about joy and peace, their voices carrying on the frozen air. Families posed before a towering evergreen in the central plaza, children squealing with delight as photographers captured their matching sweaters. The world seemed wrapped in warmth and celebration, a portrait of holiday perfection that belonged on greeting cards and television specials, but high above the festive streets, in a weathered apartment building on the city's edge. The holiday wore a different face. The Walker residence occupied a modest unit on the 8th floor, where radiators clanked and walls showed the yellow stain of decades. The furniture was sparse but clean, each item arranged with care despite its age. A small Christmas tree stood in the corner, rescued from a thrift store bin just 3 days prior. Its branches drooped slightly, but Astrid had transformed it into something magical with paper snowflakes cut from old magazines, crayon-colored ornaments, and a star fashioned from aluminum foil. On the refrigerator, held by a chipped magnet, hung a page torn from a department store catalog. The image showed a gleaming red bicycle with silver handlebars and a bell shaped like a ladybug. Astrid had circled it in purple marker, adding a small heart beside the price tag. Finn glanced at it every morning, calculating numbers that never quite added up. The bicycle cost more than he earned in 2 weeks, and winter rent was due in 6 days. Finn himself was 36 years old, broad-shouldered and strong from years of physical labor. Calluses roughened his palms, and faint lines creased his forehead, evidence of sleepless nights and relentless worry. Once, he had been a promising engineering student at the local community college, earning solid marks and dreaming of designing electrical systems. But life had other plans. When his wife grew sick, he abandoned textbooks for overtime, trading blueprints for mop handles. After she passed, he took a full-time custodial position at Sterling Enterprises because the benefits were steady and the schedule flexible enough to raise a daughter alone. Astrid sat cross-legged on the couch, her golden hair spilling past her shoulders as she watched her father button his faded work jacket. She was small for 7, with enormous blue eyes that seemed to absorb everything. Wisdom lived in those eyes, the kind that comes too early to children who learn young that wishes do not always come true. Beside her lay a stuffed bear with a missing ear, a gift from her mother that Astrid never released at bedtime. 2 stockings hung from a nail near the window. One was red velvet, slightly worn, with the letter A stitched in gold thread. The other was green flannel, plain and empty, marked with a crooked D that Astrid had sewn herself using yarn from Helen's craft box. She had placed it there 3 nights ago, explaining to Finn that Santa needed to know Daddy deserved presents too. Finn knelt before her, pulling her small hands into his rough ones. He explained that tonight he had to work a special shift, but he promised to call before she fell asleep. His voice was gentle, carrying none of the frustration that churned beneath his ribs. Astrid nodded solemnly, attempting a brave smile that wobbled at the corners. She asked if Santa Claus would visit Daddy at the office, since Daddy would not be home to greet him. Finn felt something crack in his chest, a fissure that had binn widening for years. He kissed her forehead, told her to dream of snowmen and gingerbread, and slipped out the door before his composure shattered entirely. Helen Brooks lived 2 doors down, a kind widow in her early 60s who had befriended Finn the day he moved in. Her apartment smelled of cinnamon and pine, decorated with ornaments collected over 40 years of marriage. Tinsel draped the doorway, and a ceramic nativity scene occupied her coffee table. When Finn knocked, she welcomed Astrid inside with a plate of warm cookies and a knowing glance at him. Helen remarked that Astrid was the sweetest child in the building, then added with a teasing smile that her father was the most stubborn, never willing to accept help when it was offered. Finn thanked her awkwardly, guilt knotting in his stomach. He hated burdening anyone, especially someone who had already given so much without asking for anything in return. As he descended the stairwell, Finn paused at a window overlooking the street below, through frosted glass. He watched families stroll arm in arm, couples kissing beneath strands of white lights, children pointing at window displays. He pressed his palm against the cold pane and wondered when the distance between himself and that world had grown so vast. Once, he had walked those streets with his wife, their laughter rising like steam in the winter air. Now he walked alone, always moving toward some obligation, never arriving at peace. The Sterling Enterprises Tower rose 40 floors above downtown, a monument of steel and glass crowned by the company logo blazing against the night sky. Inside, the lobby gleamed with polished marble, crystal chandeliers, and a Christmas tree so tall that its golden star nearly brushed the ceiling. Gifts wrapped in silver paper spilled beneath the branches, each one empty, placed there by designers who understood optics better than generosity. Alexandra Sterling stood at the window of her corner office, watching the city sparkle below. At 34, she was one of the youngest chief executives in the industry, the daughter of the company's founder and the target of constant scrutiny. Her blonde hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and her tailored red dress hugged her frame with quiet elegance. She projected authority in every gesture, every word. Yet beneath that polished exterior lived a loneliness few would ever suspect. Earlier that day, the board had convened for its final meeting of the year. George Dermott, the chief financial officer, had proposed slashing the custodial staff and outsourcing cleaning services to cut costs. Alexandra had pushed back hard, arguing that those who maintained the building deserved loyalty, not layoffs. The room had grown tense, voices rising, until she reminded them whose name adorned the tower outside. Now, as the clock crept toward 9, her phone buzzed with invitations to galas and parties, each promising champagne and laughter among the elite. She declined them all, preferring the silence of her empty office to conversations where everyone smiled because of her title rather than her heart. She scrolled through an email from Human Resources, a routine report listing employees still clocked in that evening. Most names belonged to security personnel. One stood apart: Finn Walker, night shift cleaner. Curiosity nudged her, so she opened his file. The screen revealed years of consistent attendance, countless overtime hours, 0 complaints, and almost no recognition. He had never requested a raise, never missed a shift, never caused trouble. But deeper in the archive, another document caught her attention. 5 years earlier, an anonymous whistleblower had reported financial irregularities orchestrated by George Dermott. The tip had arrived through an internal channel, traced eventually to an account registered under Finn Walker's employee number. because of that single act of honesty. The company had avoided a scandal that might have destroyed its reputation. Yet the matter had been buried quietly. Dermot reassigned rather than terminated, and the whistleblower never acknowledged. Alexandra leaned back in her chair, guilt pressing against her ribs. This man had protected Sterling Enterprises at great personal risk, and the company had repaid him with silence. She remembered Dermot's smug expression in the boardroom earlier, his eagerness to eliminate the very workforce that included the man who once exposed him. Something hardened inside her, a resolve that had been dormant for too long. Finn arrived at the lobby just as the final executives vanished into waiting town cars. Clinton Reed, the night security guard, greeted him with a tired nod and handed over the checklist. The older man mentioned triple pay for the holiday shift, then sighed about his grandchildren waiting at home. Finn assured him he would handle everything and urged Clinton to leave early, alone in the lobby. Finn paused before the towering Christmas tree. Its perfection felt almost mocking, ornaments gleaming in flawless symmetry, gifts stacked with geometric precision. He reached out and touched one of the empty boxes, thinking of Astrid's lopsided paper star and the bicycle she would not find beneath their modest tree. A bitter smile crossed his face before he turned back to his work. He assembled his supply cart, checking bottles of cleaning solution, fresh rags, extra trash bags, and rubber gloves. Then he began his route through the silent floors, pushing the cart past conference rooms where champagne flutes still sat on tables and offices where personal items lay forgotten, somewhere along the way. He slipped in his earbuds and pressed play on a recording Astrid had made weeks ago. Her voice filled his ears, high and sweet, singing carols slightly off-key. The sound softened the ache in his chest, though it could not erase it. On the 23rd floor, he encountered Oliver Hayes, a young technician barely out of college. Oliver stood outside the server room, phone pressed to his ear, panic flashing across his face. He muttered about overheating systems, emergency protocols, and supervisors who refused to answer calls on Christmas Eve. Finn approached cautiously, asking if something was wrong. Oliver glanced at him dismissively, noting the janitorial uniform, and suggested he return upstairs. But Finn pressed further, mentioning that he heard the cooling fans running abnormally loud and asking whether the secondary power line had been checked. Oliver's eyes widened. Those were not questions a janitor typically asked. Finn explained briefly that he had studied electrical engineering once, though life had taken him elsewhere. Oliver hesitated, then stepped aside, allowing Finn access to the room. Inside, red warning lights pulsed on every console. Temperature readings climbed toward critical thresholds. If the servers failed now, months of financial data could be corrupted, transactions lost, and the company's year-end reports thrown into chaos. Oliver's hands trembled as he scanned readouts he barely understood. Finn studied the wall schematic, tracing conduits and breakers with practiced ease. Within moments, he identified the problem: a temporary wiring configuration left by contractors weeks earlier was now overloading a secondary circuit. The solution required rerouting power through a backup path while manually resetting several breakers in a precise sequence. He talked Oliver through each step, voice calm and measured despite the urgency. Together, they isolated circuits, transferred loads, and monitored gauges until the warning lights flickered from red to amber to green. The hum of the cooling system steadied, fans slowing to normal rhythm. A message appeared on the main screen: system stabilized. Oliver exhaled sharply, gratitude spilling from his lips in a rush of words. He asked Finn how he knew what to do, why he was mopping floors instead of managing networks. Finn shrugged. saying only that sometimes people end up where they need to be rather than where they planned. He gathered his cart and left before Oliver could ask anything more. What neither man realized was that security cameras had recorded every moment. 3 floors above. Alexandra stood in the monitoring room beside the head of building security, watching the playback in stunned silence. She observed Finn diagnosing the fault, guiding Oliver with patience and precision, then slipping away without seeking credit. Her respect deepened, sharpened by the injustice of a man so capable being dismissed as invisible. By the time Finn returned to his normal route, nearly an hour had passed. His checklist remained unfinished, floors unpolished, restrooms untouched. He worked faster, sweat dampening his collar, knowing each minute cost him precious time with Astrid. Around 10, he found a quiet corner and called Helen's number. The video connected to reveal Astrid in snowflake pajamas, clutching her one-eared bear. Behind her, Helen's Christmas tree sparkled. Astrid asked if Daddy would be home soon, if the reindeer had reached the office yet. Finn swallowed hard, apologizing for the delay, promising to make it up tomorrow. Astrid nodded, trying to smile, though her lower lip quivered. She told him she had asked Santa to bring something special for Daddy first, because Daddy worked harder than anyone and deserved presents too. Finn pressed a fist against his mouth, turning his head so she would not see his eyes fill. He told her he loved her, told her to sleep well, and ended the call before his voice could betray him. For a long moment, he leaned against the cold glass of a window overlooking the glittering city. Down below, laughter drifted up from a rooftop party. Somewhere a clock chimed 11. He felt small, invisible, a ghost among the gilded trappings of wealth that would never belong to him. Yet even in that moment of despair, he thought not of himself but of Astrid, and that thought pulled him upright. There was work to finish, and self-pity would not finish it. In her office, Alexandra stared at the whistleblower file once more. She thought about her own Christmas memories, extravagant parties where strangers flattered her father, presents wrapped in designer paper that meant nothing, smiles that never reached anyone's eyes. The loneliness had begun there, in gilded ballrooms, and followed her into boardrooms and corner offices. Now, for the first time in years, she felt the possibility of something different. She picked up the phone and dialed Human Resources, instructing the on-call coordinator to prepare an immediate promotion package for Finn Walker. She specified title, salary, benefits, and a housing stipend through the company's new employee support initiative. When the coordinator hesitated, Alexandra reminded her that signatures could be applied electronically and that she intended to complete the paperwork tonight. She retrieved a gift box from her closet, originally intended for a retiring executive. Inside lay a brass key on a velvet ribbon, symbolic of a new apartment available through the company's relocation program. She added a handwritten card, choosing each word with care. The message read simply, "To the man who kept our lights on when no one was watching. It is time someone keeps a light on for you and your daughter." She sealed the envelope, tucked it beside the contract folder, and reached for her red cashmere sweater. Her assistant had called twice about the gala across town. Alexandra silenced the phone and stepped into the elevator. Finn was collecting trash near the lobby tree when the elevator chimed. He assumed it was Clinton returning for forgotten keys and called out a casual warning about the wet floor. But the figure that emerged stopped him cold. Alexandra walked toward him slowly, her heels clicking against marble, holiday lights casting gold across her features. She looked nothing like the distant executive glimpsed in company newsletters. She looked human, almost hesitant, as if approaching something fragile. Finn straightened, nearly knocking over his mop bucket. He stammered an apology, worried he had left a hallway dirty or missed an office on her floor. She shook her head gently, her smile soft and genuine. She asked if he was Finn Walker, and when he confirmed, She gestured toward a pair of armchairs arranged near the tree. He protested that his clothes were dusty, that such fine furniture was not meant for someone like him. She replied that furniture existed precisely for people who worked as hard as he did, then sat down and waited, reluctantly. Finn lowered himself onto the cushion across from her, hands clasped between his knees. She placed the gift box on the table between them and asked him to open it. Inside, he found the brass key and the handwritten card. He read her words once, then again, lips moving silently. Confusion flickered across his face. He asked whether there had been a mistake, whether the key belonged to some vice president or department head. Alexandra explained that the company had recently acquired an apartment building as part of an employee wellness program. The unit waiting for him had 2 bedrooms, good schools nearby, and a neighborhood far safer than his current address. Finn shook his head slowly, struggling to comprehend. He asked why she was doing this, what she wanted in return. He said he had nothing to offer except his labor and his word. Alexandra reached into her folder and withdrew the contract. She described the new position Facility Engineering Supervisor, responsible for overseeing building systems, training maintenance crews, and coordinating with contractors. The salary was triple his current wage, with full tuition coverage to complete his engineering degree through evening classes. She set the documents on the table and waited for him to react. He stared at the pages, reading lines about benefits and responsibilities and start dates. Then she pulled out a second document, the old whistleblower report, and read aloud the modest paragraph Finn had written 5 years earlier. He had asked for nothing, claimed no reward, sought only to protect the company and his co-workers from fraud. She told him that because of his courage. Hundreds of jobs had been saved, the company's reputation preserved, and justice quietly served. She told him she owed him more than paperwork could ever repay. But this was a beginning. Finn's hands trembled as he set the contract down. Years of struggle pressed against his chest, years of telling himself that survival was enough, that dreams were luxuries he could not afford. Now a stranger with kind eyes was handing him a key and a future, asking nothing but his acceptance. Before he could respond, his phone vibrated. The screen showed Astrid's face, Helen's number beneath. He looked at Alexandra apologetically, but she waved him on, her expression warm. Astrid appeared on the video, half asleep, asking one last time if Daddy had seen Santa yet. Finn glanced at the key in his palm. The document spread before him, the woman who had descended from the tower to deliver miracles. He told Astrid that, yes, something wonderful had happened. He said an angel in a red sweater had brought a gift he never expected. Astrid's eyes widened, sleepiness vanishing. She asked if the angel was pretty, and Finn laughed, warmth flooding his chest for the first time in months. He promised to explain everything in the morning, told her to rest, and ended the call. When he turned back, Alexandra was watching him with an expression he could not quite name, something between admiration and longing. She remarked that his daughter sounded wonderful. Finn nodded, pride softening his features. He said Astrid was the reason he kept going, the light that made darkness bearable. Alexandra glanced at the towering tree beside them, its ornaments flawless, its emptiness obvious. She admitted that she envied him in a way. All her wealth could not buy what he possessed, someone who loved him purely, without condition or calculation. They talked for a while longer, exchanging fragments of their lives. She spoke of board meetings and hollow parties. He spoke of late nights and lullabies. Somewhere in that conversation, the distance between CEO and custodian dissolved, replaced by something closer to understanding. At last, Finn signed the contract. His handwriting wavered, but the letters formed clearly, Finn Walker. Alexandra added her signature below, then pressed an electronic seal that made the document official. She stood and extended her hand. He rose to meet her, clasping it firmly. For a moment, they stood as equals beneath the glow of 1,000 tiny lights. She told him that when he settled into the new apartment, she would like to send Astrid a proper Christmas tree, tall enough to see from the window. Finn smiled and said that if the gift was for Astrid, he could never refuse her. But, he added, he would let his daughter thank her in person someday. Alexandra stepped back toward the elevator, pausing at the door. She wished him a Merry Christmas, her voice carrying none of the corporate detachment he had expected. Then the doors closed, and she was gone. Finn stood alone in the lobby, key in one hand, contract in the other, outside. Snow continued to fall. Inside, the Christmas tree seemed somehow warmer, its lights no longer mocking but welcoming. He tucked the key into his pocket, gathered his supplies, and finished his shift with a lightness he had not felt in years. When he finally reached Helen's apartment, Dawn was painting the horizon pink. Helen opened the door quietly, gesturing toward the couch where Astrid lay curled beneath a knitted blanket. Finn thanked her with a hug, then lifted his daughter gently and carried her home. He did not sleep. Instead, he sat beside Astrid's bed, watching her breathe, thinking about the words he would use to explain their new life. When she finally stirred, sunlight streaming through thin curtains, he was ready. She asked if Santa had come. Finn laughed and handed her a cup of warm cocoa he had prepared while she slept. He told her about the angel in red, the brass key, the apartment with 2 bedrooms and a view of the park. Astrid listened, eyes growing wider with each detail. She leaped into his arms, nearly spilling the cocoa, shouting that she knew Santa had heard her wish. Finn held her tight, tears sliding down his cheeks, and whispered that sometimes miracles arrived in elevators rather than chimneys. Later that morning, using an advance on his new salary, Finn walked to the second-hand store and purchased the red bicycle from the catalog. He wheeled it back through snowy streets, enduring curious glances, grinning like a man half his age. When Astrid saw it leaning against the doorframe, she screamed with joy and demanded to ride immediately. They spent the afternoon in the courtyard below their old building, Astrid wobbling on 2 wheels while Finn jogged beside her, steadying the handlebars until she found her balance. She fell twice, laughed each time, and pedaled triumphantly around a patch of shoveled pavement. Within 2 weeks, they moved into the new apartment. It was everything Alexandra had promised: clean walls, wide windows, a kitchen with a working stove, and a bedroom for Astrid decorated in soft lavender. A tall Christmas tree arrived on moving day, delivered by a company service with a card that simply read, "For Astrid, from a friend." Astrid insisted on writing a thank you note. She used her best crayons, forming careful letters on lined paper. The message said, "Dear Miss Angel in red, thank you for giving Daddy a new job and me a big tree. Daddy smiles a lot now. You are very pretty. Love, Astrid." She drew a picture of 3 figures beneath a golden star, labeled Daddy, Astrid, and Angel. Finn began his new role on the 2nd of January. Oliver Hayes greeted him at the door to the engineering department, grinning broadly. Word had spread about the Christmas Eve rescue, and the technical staff welcomed Finn as if he had always belonged there. He traded his mop for a tablet, his cleaning cart for a supervisor's badge, and stepped into a life he had once abandoned. Evening classes started in February. Finn sat among students half his age, scribbling notes, asking questions, rediscovering the curiosity that had defined his younger years. It was exhausting and exhilarating. Each lecture a reminder that reinvention was possible at any age. Months passed. Spring melted the snow. Summer warmed the city. Autumn painted the parks in amber and crimson. Through it all, Finn rose steadily within the company, earning respect not through favoritism but through competence and integrity. He never forgot where he had come from, never dismissed the janitors who still mopped the floors he once cleaned. Alexandra observed his progress from a respectful distance, reading quarterly reports that mentioned his initiatives, hearing praise from department heads. Occasionally, their paths crossed in hallways or elevators. Brief exchanges of polite words and genuine smiles. As the next December approached, she found herself thinking about the tree lighting ceremony that Sterling Enterprises hosted each year in the main lobby. Hundreds of employees gathered to watch the switch flip, singing carols, sipping cider, celebrating another year completed. It occurred to her that Astrid might enjoy seeing it. She found Finn in the engineering bay, reviewing a schematic with 2 junior technicians. When they finished, she approached and asked if he had a moment. They walked together to a quiet corridor where afternoon light spilled through tall windows. She explained the ceremony, described the tree, the lights, the crowd. Then, hesitantly, she asked whether he might bring Astrid. She wanted the little girl to see the place her father had helped keep running all those years. Finn studied her face, recognizing something vulnerable beneath the professional composure. He said they would be honored to attend. On the evening of the ceremony, Finn arrived at the lobby with Astrid perched on his shoulders. She wore a green velvet dress Helen had sewn especially for the occasion, and her golden hair was tied with a red ribbon. Her eyes swept across the massive tree, ornaments glittering, star gleaming, and she gasped with wonder. Alexandra stood near the podium, welcoming employees and guests, when she spotted Finn in the crowd. Her prepared remarks faltered for just a moment. She recovered quickly, thanking everyone for their dedication throughout the year, then invited the guest of honor to flip the switch. To the surprise of many, she gestured toward Astrid. Finn lifted his daughter down, and Alexandra knelt to her level, explaining that little girls who believed in magic deserved to light the tree. Astrid looked up at her father, who nodded encouragingly. Then she pressed the oversized button with both hands. The lobby erupted in brilliance, thousands of lights blazing to life, reflecting off marble and glass and shining eyes. Applause filled the atrium, and Astrid laughed, clapping along. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Alexandra found Finn and Astrid near the refreshment table. Astrid tugged her father's sleeve and asked if the pretty lady was the angel from the story. Finn smiled and said yes. She was the one who had changed everything. Astrid stepped forward shyly and handed Alexandra a folded piece of paper. Inside was a new drawing, the same 3 figures beneath a golden star. But now the angel wore a crown, and the word family was written in wobbly letters above their heads. Alexandra's composure cracked. Just slightly. She thanked Astrid, voice catching, and promised to hang the picture in her office where she could see it every day. As the evening wound down, the 3 of them stood together beneath the glowing tree. Finn held Astrid in one arm, her head resting against his shoulder, exhaustion finally catching up with excitement. Alexandra stood beside them, not quite touching, yet somehow connected. Outside, snow began to fall again, flakes drifting past the windows like whispered secrets. Inside, warmth radiated from lights, from laughter, from the simple presence of people who had found one another against all odds. Sometimes, the narrator reflected, the greatest Christmas gifts are not wrapped in paper or hidden beneath trees. They arrive in unexpected moments, delivered by strangers who become something more. They come in the form of a brass key, a signed contract, a child's drawing, a hand extended across the divide between worlds. Finn Walker had spent years believing he was invisible, A man who cleaned up after celebrations he would never attend. Now he stood at the center of one, his daughter giggling in his arms. A woman who might become a friend watching with eyes full of hope. And perhaps that was the truest miracle of all, not that life became easy, but that it became possible again. Not that sorrow vanished, but that joy returned. Not that he reached some imagined finish line, but that he finally believed the race was worth running. As the last guests departed and the lobby grew quiet, Astrid whispered a sleepy question. She asked if next Christmas could be even better. Finn kissed her forehead and said he thought it just might be. Alexandra, overhearing, added softly that she would do her best to make sure. The three of them lingered a moment longer, silhouettes against a sea of twinkling lights. Then Finn carried his daughter toward the door, pausing once to glance back. Alexandra raised a hand in farewell, a small gesture carrying immeasurable weight. He stepped into the cold night, snowflakes settling on his coat, Astrid's breath warm against his neck. Above, the Sterling Tower glowed against the dark sky, its lights no longer symbols of distance but beacons of belonging. Somewhere in that building. A woman sat alone in her office, tracing the crayon lines of a child's drawing, smiling at the word family, and in a modest apartment not far away. A red bicycle waited beside a tall Christmas tree. A brass key hung on a hook by the door, and a stuffed bear with one ear sat propped against a pillow, guarding dreams that had finally been given permission to grow. Sometimes, the greatest gift a person can receive is simply to be seen, to be valued, to be told that their quiet sacrifices matter. Finn Walker had spent years keeping lights on for others. Now, at last, someone had chosen to keep a light on for him. And in that glow, everything changed.